Hey everyone, it's Martin, live streaming from Occupy Detroit. I sat down here to get out my belongings and stuff, and I'm sitting next to
Neil Kiernan of V-Radio.
Neil Kiernan of V-Radio, and we're going to post the link as well if you guys are interested. He appears to be doing an interview with Jaira, who's one of our live streamers, and also a medical volunteer. Thank you for your service. There she is.
Hi. Okay, and just the volunteerism spirit of all the people that are participating here. I mean, we're bearing the harsh elements here because everybody believes so strongly in the cause. And, I know the nurse that was running the medical tent, she was here for days and nights without much sleep at all, and until there was appropriate staff to take over for her. Everybody here is so dedicated because they feel so strongly about what we're doing here and the issues and the people that we're fighting for. Some of those people are of ourselves, and some of them come from different socioeconomic backgrounds. But it's like we all qualify each other here, and we all consider each other family. And
that is really awesome. It's funny is that the moment I walked in here, I walked back to the food area. I saw that homeless people were being fed and all that, and I immediately thought to myself, I have these 6 or 7 big bags of chili I'm gonna bring tomorrow, because it's sitting in my freezer and I don't need it, and there's a whole bunch of people out here huddled in the damn cold. I noticed the camping vibe and I wanted to participate in it. I'm dealing with some stupid stuff at home and I have kids, so I can't be here every day, but I'll probably be able to show up here on the weekends, pitch my little tent, but...
and a lot of people have the misconception that there's a lot of jobless, homeless people that are down here, and that is the crux of the movement, and it's not. A lot of us that are here are professionals or...
Well, yeah, I got that. I asked around, I'm like, how many homeless people do you think are here? They said no more than maybe 20% or something of the people here were homeless. That's what he said. It was just a guess. But they want us to be marginalized because it's a classic ad hominem. It's let's attack the people who are giving the message to try to discredit it. Oh, there are just a bunch of lazy people who can't find a job. I live in Chesterfield, Michigan. The unemployment rate there is about 43%. They never report that correctly. Anytime you're dealing with unemployment rates, you're dealing with people who are currently drawing unemployment. You're not dealing with people who are no longer eligible, or who are never eligible because employers know to fire you under 90 days so they don't have to pay you.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, where I'm at, in order to get into a fast food restaurant, it reminds me of the conversations you used to have, say, in the 80s, where it was like, well, it's like getting into GM. I got this friend, he'll get you into GM. That's what it's like to get into Burger King, where I live.
Right.
You got to have a friend of a friend who will get you into Burger King. I would do anything. I grew up on a farm. I shoveled cow excrement. There's nothing that people are going to ask me to do. There's just nothing here.
So let me ask you a question. How do you look at this do you see this as kind of an experiment in sustainability and self-sufficiency? Because this is a group of people who really draws upon their own very limited resources and kindness of others. Do you think that model could actually be put to work in some of these places that have stupendously high unemployment? For instance, there's a lot of urban farming going on here, and I'm not a Detroiter, so I'm just speaking of a couple things that I know. There's, and we just amongst ourselves, we provide for each other. We'll go to extreme lengths for damn near almost complete strangers, except we know they're brothers and sisters. So do you think that maybe this could be some sort of a social experiment that could teach people how to cope better in communities that can't prosper in traditional ways?
I had a conversation with somebody I was interviewing earlier about that very thing. It's people don't know how to relate to each other. There's It was unusual to me, for example, that I had neighbors that were what I referred to as cup of sugar neighbors. Like if you need a cup of sugar, you go get it. That's only happened to me one time since I left the country. And the reason that's relevant to what I'm getting at here is that we have, and I truly think this is by design, been put in a position where we don't talk to each other. We don't work together. It's everybody for themselves. When you study the work of people like Edward Bernays, they designed society to be a materialistic situation where your success was measured in what you purchased, your freedom was measured in what you purchased, and everybody's out for themselves, and anybody who can't, somehow manage to find a way to work out in the rat race fails. There's something wrong with them. They're a failure. But if you work hard enough, everybody can be rich. That kind of silly nonsense that people bring out.
Yeah.
Maybe we want to go under attack.
And the answer is yes. Especially in self-determination and self-governance. I've seen a lot of that work here. The consensus decision-making models that you guys are talking about are awesome.
Yeah, this is my first time ever experiencing anything like this.
What do you think?
It's amazing. I wonder how it scales to a nationwide level. It's a slow process, but damn, it's worth the time.
I know a friend of mine, his name is Jack Reed, and he runs a place called Community Planet, and they want to make little communities, and he's an expert in consensus decision making. And what you do for larger scale is you have smaller scale groups reach consensus of their views on something that might be relevant to the larger group.
Yes.
Then those people in turn send a representative who had reached consensus with them, and then they meet with other people, and then the circle gets smaller and smaller and smaller until you're down to, okay, well, this is the consensus of the entirety. It can happen. A lot of it is just about societal social barriers. Like today when I was talking to a nice girl, I think her name was Cheryl, and initially she was apprehensive when I wanted to ask her questions, but over the course of the conversation she figured out, no, this guy really is a radio guy and he's here to talk to me. She opened up.
Let's plug your website real quick too, while we're at it.
V-hyphen.
Hang on, I've got
Here, I always
on.
do it's on your shirt, isn't it?
Yes. V-radio.org.
I like to take flyers and scroll them down on my when I live stream. So.
By the way, will this be available later?
Yeah. I'm gonna put it on instant replay, and it'll also be available. We have a on-demand library. Oh, V-Radio.
Awesome.
Wacky Jackie's online with us already. Oh, hey you guys, I'm sorry, we have a chat window open, but it was covered by our own picture. We've got some chatters in here saying hello. What's going on down there tomorrow, and is anyone going? Is a question from Livestream. Does anybody know?
The General Assembly is at 12 o'clock. This is Jara. I will be live streaming the General Assembly. So please tune in and watch. You'll see lots of good information and see how the format of a General Assembly works. And I think you'll like what you see.
I'll be co-facilitating.
Nice. So you were telling me that your friend runs a center that deals with facilitation. I forgot the name of it.
Community Planet.
Community Planet. And what they do is they will reach smaller consensus on a smaller level, and then send point people to advocate on behalf of the group.
That's correct.
So when you reach a consensus in a smaller group, you not only have to agree on the thing that you're agreeing about, but you pretty much have to have an idea of how everybody feels about it too, correct? Because you need to advocate on the spot without having to go back and forth between your groups.
Right.
It would be really nice if your friend, is there a website? Is there educational stuff?
I believe it's communityplanet.org.
Okay, hey Jackie, can you type for posterity, communityplanet.org? I've got gloves on, and you're at home. Please.
Really fast. Let me see if I can line up.
Because today we received some.
Oh, she got it.
Great.
You're faster than me.
One of our live streamers as well. So I received a packet of information from Global Revolution TV today, and they put together a booklet basically giving you step-by-step instructions on how to set up an occupation from your camp layout all the way to dealing with funding and stuff like that. So that's one piece of it, and I think I'd like to reach out to your friend and get more information about the consensus process.
He teaches classes in it, and he sells a book called The Next Evolution. It's extremely good. I have a copy of it. I've read several chapters of it on my radio show. He gave me permission to do that. He's been on my radio show many times. So we did one show on consensus decision making, and there was an interest in doing more of them. I got swamped with other guests.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what was the title of that book?
The Next Evolution.
I'm gonna have to hit Amazon. Oh, wait. I'm sorry, guys. I don't want to be that dork. Put my face in the computer.
I'll continue my
here.
interview while you're waiting.
Something I realized, the higher up the financial ladder you climb, the more isolated you are, and the more people isolate themselves from you. It's really a bizarre thing that happens in the upper class communities. I lived in Detroit for a long time. I lived in Ferndale, And, you know, even in Ferndale, people were walking around friendly, willing to babysit for each other, having coffee together, inviting each other over to everybody's houses, having community parties. I moved to Bloomfield a couple years ago, and I just sold my house in Bloomfield. I couldn't stand it out there.
Right.
People drive right into their built-in garage, shut the door, and they never come out. Nobody will even allow their children to play with the other children in the neighborhood. Everybody isolates themselves completely off.
It gets worse the more money you make even. But at the same time, the funny thing is, it's when they are socializing that terrifies me. Because you're dealing with a bunch of people, I call them the Prozac generation. It's like you listen to them talk, and they're... Because I have a nice friend who, when they found out I didn't have any family, they'd always invite me over for Thanksgiving. Because I lived with one of the nephews, and they were very nice people, but it was just like everybody was talking like they were medicated the whole time, and they weren't. That's why I call them the Prozac generation. It was like, oh, so what's going on with you? Oh, well, Helen got in a car accident. Oh my, is Helen okay? Yeah. And Jack's going to college. It's like, it just made you want to scream the F word as loud as you could, just to see what they would all do.
That's called a symbiotic sleep that's a state that most people are walking around in.
Yes, absolutely. People don't want to be disturbed from that either. It reminds me of that scene in The Matrix when he's like, there are people who are in here that don't want to be unplugged, and they will fight to protect this system. And that's how you end up being called names for being at a protest where we're talking about problems that people are just kind of trying to pretend are not happening. That's why it's like, I just get back from the casino, and there's all these people there playing around with money, and right outside there were people lying around on a blanket there. There's just no way that was adequate enough to keep them warm for the night, and I just was like, it's so weird how easily people tune out.
Yeah.
They're not even conscious of it, and like
they're not even conscious of their disconnect. Exactly.
Right, and it's right outside, and they can just put it out of their head. Me and him, though, the whole time we were eating, we were like, wow, just wow,
It's really a culture
New York City in
yeah,
the
it
house.
is. And I've been around homeless people when I grew up in Pontiac. Met a lot of them at the public library because that's a warm place they could go.
Right, yeah.
And they'd play chess with my guitar player in the band I was in at the time. And so it wasn't. It had been a while, I think. But either way, the social disconnect, the fact that it's against the rules to talk about politics and religion, the fact that it's out of fashion to be a conscious person and thinking about things that matter. As I was telling people earlier, my favorite. Oh yes, afraid to think. And then when you think about it from the very beginning of the system, who gets picked on the most at school? The kids who think.
Yeah, that's right.
You are discouraged to answer questions. You're discouraged to ask them.
You're ostracized.
Right. Yeah. And the funny thing is that the teachers don't help them do that, but they never adequately do anything to stop it either. That's why when I was going to school, it's when the Columbine thing happened, and I was thinking to myself, when that happened, they were all like, oh, it's about Mortal Kombat and Doom and violent video games. I'm like, anytime I had a violent impulse in school, it didn't have anything to do with Mortal Kombat. It didn't have anything to do with Doom. It had to do with the rich, snobby kids consistently, endlessly harassing me and, in some cases physically assaulting me.
Yeah.
That's what made me think about being violent. I don't advocate it, and I would never do it, but it just annoyed me that they totally ignored what the real problem was.
Or the opposite happens with kids that they consider on the fringe or nerds, like people like us. I mean, you either turn it outwards or you turn it inwards, because suicide is really an act of anger and hate against oneself.
Yeah.
And a lot of girls, I think, become suicidal when they're, smarter and trying to prosper and trying to exercise their intellect.
Well, couple that with the fact that intelligent people have a harder time tuning things out.
That's right.
Like in war situations, people with higher intelligence are more likely to contract the various mental illnesses. My grandfather was one of them. He came back from the war with totally horrible post-traumatic stress, and it was because he was so smart. He couldn't tune out what was going on around him. And they say that people who aren't very intelligent have an easier time because it doesn't really occur to them the full weight of what it is they're doing.
That's right.
But to speak about like what's going on here, it's there are so many people that, I mean, because like of my activism, we talk about the resource-based economy model, and people who are advocates of capitalism, you're usually arguing with people who have 2.5 kids and a Humvee and gas guzzler and a really nice house somewhere, who are like, if you just work as hard as I did, you'll be fine. You know, and the first thing that pops into my head is my mom, you know, when I grew up in Pontiac, Michigan, literally worked usually 3 jobs. She could not afford a car, even working 3 jobs, okay? I certainly didn't get a car, okay? She couldn't afford one. You know, nobody could say my mother did not work her damn fanny off, because she did.
Right.
Just to be just as poor as she always was. You know, that's the part of it they don't want to get, is that statistics are against you. There's a certain degree of luck involved with it, and not everybody has those opportunities. It's just that simple. And when the economy tanks, those opportunities become more and more and more rare. You know, and now those opportunities are being handed to people who are even more desperate than we are. You know, and I don't blame them, you know, but they're going to countries where the economies have been intentionally destroyed. When you go in there, you find out, you know, it's like the Economic Hitman talks about this in the Zeitgeist Addendum movie, is that they go in, they undercut everybody in there, usually with basically with super cheap prices. They put all of the farmers in the area out of work, and then they buy up all that farmland, and then they put those farmers to work in sweatshop factories. Because at this point, 50 cents an hour is slightly better than starving to death, so they take it. You know, that's why it's unusual to me, particularly, it's almost like economic pollution. When you endorse a company like Walmart, people don't think about the big picture of what's going to happen when they help a company like that prosper. You know, they don't think about that. They think about the immediate gratification of, well, I got a DVD player for $60. You know,
right.
They don't understand that by doing that, their local economy is going to suffer. And that's why I tell people, whether it be in this movement or in others, we are kind of getting to the point that through technology, like technological unemployment, you know, the idea that technology is automating things, or just through advocacy, you know, basically innovations in shipping technology, is now making it to the point like where the overhead for making stuff in third world countries where everybody's desperate for work is now possible. Back in the 40s or whatever, the idea of manufacturing in China to sell in the United States would be silly, you know. But now, through technology, it's not silly. And so the days of working for your labor and selling your labor are becoming a thing of the past. And that's why I tell people, evaluate what it is that you need. Do you need a job, or do you need the ability to take care of yourself? The technology to take care of ourselves.
Words of wisdom,
well,
seriously.
Yeah. The technology to take care of ourselves is all there. It's not Star Trek anymore. And it's amazing to me how ignorant some people are. Like, I remember bringing up geothermal energy, and this guy was like, geothermal, that's not real, that's Star Trek. I'm like, were you aware that Iceland powers itself 70% with geothermal energy?
Exactly.
It's 70. Yeah.
What if, I have a novel idea, what if we put a geothermal generator atop of the Dome of Congress and we harness the hot air to power Washington, or to power homes?
It's funny that you bring up Congress, because there are people who are like, well, if we just get the right people elected. The system is designed from the ground up to benefit the corporations. It was like that in the very inception of this country. When I worked for Senator Mike Gravel, he taught me the real history. And the reason, for example, we have slavery in the Constitution is because initially they wanted to ratify everything by consensus, by like overvoting, democratic voting in town hall meetings. When you study the history of the United States, that's one thing. Like in the movie The Patriot. The movie The Patriot was not accurate in everything. The one thing it was on about was you had town hall meetings, you voted by consensus. If you didn't agree, you were still able to stand out of it, which is why, for example, he decided he didn't want to be part of the war, so he didn't fight in it. But he voted. He decided he didn't want to vote because he wouldn't be able to fight. Nobody faulted him for that, but the community as a whole decided to go with the war against the British. Okay, so they tried to pass a constitution that had slavery in it, but there were too many of the states that were heavily populated with Quakers, you know, and other people who were against slavery, so they couldn't ratify the Constitution that way. Okay, so they developed the delegate system, sold it to us as the better way was to elect one guy to speak for your colony. And of course, who wins those elections to be a delegate? Well, That would be the people who have the money to travel
Rich,
around
rich white
and get
landowners.
elected. That's right. Rich white landowners. Those are the people who are going to get elected as the delegates. They go to the Constitutional Convention, quote unquote, on your behalf. After paying for your votes, then you get a constitution with slavery.
Yep.
It's the founding fathers had some okay ideas, but people tend to forget that. Like, especially when, this is the funny thing, when libertarians argue with me, because I used to be a libertarian of the classic sense. Now I'm a left libertarian, I guess would be what you'd call us. But we're like, well, the founding fathers had these universal ideas about private property and private ownership. I was like, yeah, it included human beings. The founding father I like the most, Thomas Jefferson, owned more slaves than any of them. Mm-hmm. And that's why I say to people, the system you're in was designed to continue to facilitate the aristocracy of the colonies, the rich people of the colonies. There weren't a whole lot of poor people amidst the founding fathers.
That, in fact, worked well into the 60s, and in some places it's still effective in some few places.
You convince everybody that their vote means something, but they managed to select for you a small selection of people who they've pre-got onto. I mean, like they just said, for example, those Bilderberg meetings, whether you're into conspiracy theories or not, we know the Bilderberg meetings happen.
Agreed.
Rick Perry, one of the guys they're trying to push on us, was at the last Bilderberg meeting. So, of course, he's getting pushed in the media. Mm-hmm. Whether or not you believe in any super secret cabals with coffins or any of the craziest stuff, any of the crazy stuff you see on Alex Jones or whatever, it's not unheard of that a bunch of rich people would get together and say, hey, how do we stay rich?
Yeah.
We knew those people. They were called monarchists, based monarchists, the nobility. They all worked together towards the goal of staying on top. So as long as we're in a system, another thing, I can get libertarians to agree to this, is stop trying to get politicians elected who are going to affect change, because it's not in their best interest to do what you ask. Because they work for the people who can give them the most money.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody asked us how we feel, are we against or are we for Obama? And, that's kind of the question is completely out of the scope of our movement, I think.
Right.
Think about what I said to people was, rather than investing this huge chunk of money in an education that is probably going to be outsourced by the time you're out of college anyway, invest in renewable technologies for yourself at home, get off the grid as much as you can. And if you can't afford it yourself, get together a community effort, pool your resources, and get off the grid.
Exactly.
And that doesn't mean going to live in the woods. It just means becoming more self-sufficient, so that if shit goes down and banks shut down, you're not out of food, you're not out of power, things like that. That doesn't mean let's go pick up arms and live in the woods, for those of you out there on the internet watching, because I think that's the first image that evokes.
Well, unfortunately, there are a lot of crazy people that say that.
Yeah.
But
Go get the car.
All right, go ahead and grab it. My point was to say the system is not designed to facilitate us. We are only going to be part of it as long as we are useful to it. And us being useful is not in their best interest. And that's why I say to people, become independent from it. When you think about it, our society has changed immensely. Like, I used to watch Little House on the Prairie, and it occurred to me, he only goes to the general store like once a month. It's like, that's something I say on V-Radio all the time. I'm like, if aliens came here and abducted just the department stores and the markets, even with all the resources still here, most people would have no frickin' idea what to do with themselves.
Yeah.
Because we have totally divorced ourselves from the ability to take care of ourselves. We are becoming more and more dependent on the system every day.
Yeah.
We are becoming more and more dependent on finding a way to be useful to someone who has more money than we do, to work for them in a way that will make them more money from our work than we will ever get.
Yeah.
Okay? And so that's why I advocate looking into a resource-based economy, utilizing the technologies that already exist to communally, as a group, come together and make communities that are self-sustaining. The technology exists.
Communities that are empowered, too. People are not empowered these days, or they don't think that they are.
They don't think that they are is a very adequate way of explaining that.
Yeah.
There's something Ben Stewart, you can look up the Hanged Man Project. Ben Stewart made Chimatica and Esoteric Agenda. And if you go on YouTube, you'll find the Hanged Man Project, and he gives a speech. I've had him on my show like 5 times. And he pointed out that when the colonists were liberated, they still wanted George to be their king. because they weren't even mentally prepared for what freedom means, and they're still looking for someone to direct them. You know, they're still looking for someone to be in charge, and we're conditioned to think that way from the beginning. Okay, there's more to freedom than the physical freedom. It's a state of mind, and if you don't have it, it doesn't matter. You know, that's how you get, you know, women who stay in abusive relationships, for example. They could just pick up and leave, but they can't, or so they believe.
Right.
So they're trapped in a mental prison.
Yes. Yeah.
And we are taught from the beginning that that's how it should be. Like, I'm working on a documentary right now mostly about the internet troll phenomenon, but it's true in person too. We are taught from the earliest age that ridiculing someone is a legitimate means to diminish them, to make yourself look superior to them, is to bully someone or to pick on them or to humiliate them. And it's like, just today, actually, I was in an argument about something on Facebook involving the most basic law of physics, that an object that is lighter is easier to push than an object that is heavier. That's all it was about. And there was a group of people that disagreed with me, and because they were all friends, they defended their position despite the fact that it was completely illogical. But they managed to make fun of me enough that there were people ignoring the fact that I had just totally destroyed their argument based entirely on science. And there were people who will walk away from that conversation and go, gee, Neil lost that debate, even though I didn't say anything that was incorrect. You know, that's the way that people are kind of enslaved, and this basically just through even just intimidating words. It's not just about physical force, it's about mental force, psychological force. You know, having control over people that way, and a lot of people don't realize they're susceptible to it. Even sit down at a dinner table, you know, there's usually one outspoken person who does most of the talking, who everybody laughs at their jokes, doesn't laugh at anyone else's jokes. You know, maybe he can...
I'm sorry, you're Neil, aren't you?
Yeah, Neil.
What's your last name?
Kiernan, Kiernan.
With V-RADIO.org, right?
V-RADIO.org.
Perfect. Did you guys get that? They just wanted to reintroduce you.
Sure.
Perfect. I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt
the info machine. Want more of him.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, man.
Okay, they
Go
just
to
put
my
out
website.
a link, v-radio.org again. Excellent. I will be tuning in as well.
There are roughly 100, 200 hours of programming. My radio show is not always about any one topic. I cover the Love Police. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Charlie Veach, Danny Shine. I cover Ben Stewart, Comatica, Esoteric Agenda, and his Hangman Project. I cover the Zeitgeist Movement. I cover the Venus Project. Basically all activist movements, and I am now. It's one of the reasons I'm here, is I want to start covering the Occupy stuff.
Yeah. Interesting. Wow, I want to ask you a question about each one of those. Let's not digress, however.
Okay.
Give us more of your thoughts, though. Holy shit. I'm glad I came down here.
If you guys are listening now, as I was saying earlier, my favorite show I ever did was called On the Subject of Sheeple. If you don't listen to any of my other shows, or even if you're not into any of the level-heady stuff that I've been saying, anybody can appreciate On the Subject of Sheeple. It's a show where I played recordings of, at one point it was people who were listening to Sarah Palin, or rather were waiting outside, they were waiting outside a bookstore in Alaska in freezing weather to go just to get a chance to have Sarah Palin sign her book for them. And this guy walked around with a microphone and was asking them, so you want Sarah Palin to be president? And he was like, oh yeah, absolutely. Can you tell me anything about, what is it you like about her? What do you think of her foreign policy? And they'd kind of get blank looks on their faces like, well, I can't think of anything about that. I mean, imagine that she had to deal with issues from being on the border of Russia. Okay. And then, asks, oh, I would really like her to be the next American president. And what do you think of her financial plans? And they're like, I can't think of any off the top of my head, And then that's the whole Sarah Palin video is funny in itself. We talk about it in like an open forum format. Like I have a group of panelists. I try to get panelists from all over the world. Like I usually have, like there's a guy from the Netherlands who comes on. There's a guy from Mexico who comes on frequently. And in these areas, thanks to the internet, I can do that via Skype. But in any case, the second video is entitled "Why Ron Paul Did Not Win the Florida Primary," and this is this guy walking around a Florida beach, and he's asking people who they voted for and why. And one of them, an African-American gentleman, said, "I voted for Barack Obama." You know, and there's nothing wrong with him doing that. I'd have been just as displeased if somebody said they didn't vote for him because he was, you know, black. But the point was is that they asked him, "Well, what's your favorite policy?" And he's like, "Favorite policy? I can't think of any at the moment." You know, it's like, you just voted for this guy to be the executive of our country. You don't know anything about him. You know, and it's some of the really frivolous reasons that people vote.
We were sold a really fantastic man and a fantastic candidate. It was I mean, he's a great prospect all around, and he's very likable by so many groups of people. And so whoever it is that picks, whoever gets to go next, picked the right guy. We were sold an excellent guy, and had he not worked for who he works for, he would have been I mean, the guy's a charismatic leader, great speaker, and the whole nine. He would have done great, but he was just picked because he was a great sell, I think. It was easy to get him into office.
Well, the funny thing
He's
is,
a lovable guy.
When I worked with Mike Gravel, he was the fiery old man with the glasses who kind of exposed Hillary when she tried to say she was an anti-war candidate. He kind of brought that up during debate, and then you never saw him again. He was the guy who read the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record way back in the 60s to help end the Vietnam War. And I asked him what he thought of Obama. He's like, you know, I remember what it was like to be a young, up-and-coming senator who's allowed himself to brainwash himself to believe that he can make serious changes, and then gets into the presidency and finds out it's not really that easy. You know, he thinks that Obama probably even allowed himself to believe that he was sincere, but the system is not it's not designed to deal with that. You know, the funny thing is even on a smaller level, like, I was a president of a nonprofit organization once, and being an executive doesn't mean you can just snap your fingers and make things happen.
Right.
There's all kinds of systems and checks and balances that prevent you from being able to do that. You got to get the Congress on board, you got to get the Senate on board, and, you know, of course, even if it's a good change, if the Republicans are holding the Congress, they're going to make sure you fail because they need you to fail so that you won't make presidency next time around. You know, that's... Yeah. It's just not a good system, and that's why I advocate a system wherein if we're going to build a bridge, we talk to architects. We don't talk to politicians. You know, if we're going to, you know, handle a food problem, we talk to farmers and agricultural experts. We don't talk to politicians. Politicians get elected through selling themselves to certain corporations. You're going to ask a politician to solve an agricultural problem, well, then he's going to give a no-bid contract to his buddies over in Monsanto, who are going to use genetically altered crops that give people cancer to maximize profits. You could just talk to the experts and build a real system. When everybody's motivated by the benefit of all people involved, you eliminate the profit motive. That's where the real work comes out. And that's basically what this is about. You know,
Agreed.
To people who are checking out my website, some of my radio listeners are involved in different conspiracy theory stuff, but that's not all what I cover. In fact, we don't talk about 9/11. We don't talk about any of that stuff. You know, not really anyway.
We try to skillfully field those questions as well, because you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Well, that's basically it. Is like I've been telling people, because there were some people involved in the Zeitgeist movement because of the first Zeitgeist movie, and I said to them, I'm like, look, if we get what we want, which is a resource-based economy that eliminates corruption at its core, then false flag terrorism will stop. It'll go away because there won't be any incentive. Concentrate on the solutions. People don't want to hear about 9/11, but you can generally explain to people, you know, you could get off the grid. You know, how about not having an electric bill? How about not having a gas bill? How about not having a grocery bill? You know, you could sell that.
Right.
But you may not be able to get them to agree to everything else. And that's one of the problems with activist groups, is like we would get all these groups, these little splinter groups, and we're like, I want you to make it about our issue, and I want you to make it about our issue. Like, the drug guys who want legalized drugs. I'm like, look, I get it, but you'll get what you want because we are not interested in stopping you from doing stuff. Okay,
we're gonna give you your voice so you can get what you want.
Right, but if you bring that up and act like, oh, and this, or this is required, then we're not talking about resource-based, economics anymore. We're not talking about solutions for the planet anymore. We're talking about, well, I don't want people using heroin, which is not even relevant to the overall. And that's why I say to people, we had one lady, she was a bit crazy, so I can't really blame her, but she was really big on the feminist stuff. And I'm, just like we tried to tell her, we're like, well, that's fine. We're all about equality and egalitarian societies. it wasn't sufficient. You know, it was like they always say they want to be equal, but this one in particular, she was not satisfied with that. She wants egalitarianism. You know, and you shake your fist a few times and it starts to become...
You know, maybe we should let women have a go at it. Men have been ruling dynasties and kingdoms for centuries, and look where that's got us. Maybe we should let them have at it.
Well, you know, the funny thing is within,
just
like,
step back and let
the
those,
activist organization that I'm part of, like, women are really high-ranking. We don't even think about it. In fact, the issue of gender had never been brought up until she brought it up.
And, you know, my organization, I work for a place, and all the executives and all the decision makers, well, like 75% of them are women as well. You know, mothers with families, really cool stuff.
No, I'm fine with it either way. I'm for, but I keep going back to the word egalitarian and equality. That's what I really want. My mom, she was the biggest person in my life. I was raised by a single mom, all about that. But my mom was also, I could just hear her in my head going, why are you asking for a handout? You know, you are equal, so go be equal. You know, stop jumping on these people for, you know, for being men. It's not their fault, you know. But unfortunately, I do have to go for now, but I will be back tomorrow. Do me a favor, because I would need a link to that. Can you post that somehow, or maybe email it to me?
Yeah, what we're going to do, you guys, is we're going to shut off the live stream for 2 seconds. And Neil and I are going to exchange information. I'm going to also make sure that this video uploads correctly. We love you. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. We need to get some sponsors so we can sell commercial advertising space in between live streams. Maybe like Nike and Reebok would be good. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, I do get a kickback for my Blog Talk show.